The afternoon sun poured through the tall windows of Sullivan's boxing gym, casting long shadows across the worn canvas of the main ring. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, leather, and determination. In the center of it all stood Tyler Brooks, a young man who carried himself like he owned the world. At 24 years old, with 15 straight wins and not a single loss on his record, he had every reason to feel confident. But confidence had long ago crossed the line into something uglier. Tyler was in the middle of his training session, working combinations on the heavy bag with his crew watching from the sidelines. His entourage consisted of 3 guys who hung on his every word, laughed at every joke, and never questioned a single thing he did. They were there for the ride, hoping some of his spotlight would shine their way. His trainer, an older man named Coach Rivera, stood nearby with his arms crossed, watching with an expression that was hard to read. The gym was busy that Tuesday afternoon. Other boxers worked their craft in different corners, jumping rope, shadow boxing, hitting the speed bag with rhythmic precision. This was a real boxing gym, not one of those fancy fitness places where people pretended to be fighters. This was where serious athletes came to work, to bleed, to push themselves beyond their limits. The walls were covered with photos of past champions who had trained there, their faces frozen in moments of glory. Near the ring, an older gentleman was going about his work quietly. He wore a simple gray uniform with a name tag that read James and pushed a mop bucket across the floor, cleaning up the sweat and grime that accumulated throughout the day. His hair was gray at the temples and his face showed the lines of someone who had lived a full life. He moved with a certain grace, economical in his movements, never wasting energy. He had been working at the gym for about 6 months now, always showing up on time, doing his job without complaint, and staying out of everyone's way. Tyler finished a particularly aggressive combination on the heavy bag and stepped back, breathing hard. He noticed James mopping near the ring apron, and a mean-spirited idea formed in his mind. Without warning, he moved to the ropes closest to where James was working and started throwing wild combinations, deliberately splashing sweat in the older man's direction. His friends immediately started laughing, egging him on. "Yo, watch out!" Tyler called out mockingly. "Don't want to get any of this champion sweat on you. This stuff is probably worth more than your whole paycheck." James paused for just a moment, looked up at the young boxer, but said nothing. He simply moved his bucket to another area and continued his work. His face remained neutral, showing neither anger nor hurt. It was as if he had seen this kind of behavior before, as if he understood something about young men like Tyler that Tyler didn't yet understand about himself. But Tyler wasn't done. He was performing now, feeding off the laughter of his friends. "Hey, make sure you get that spot over there real good," he shouted across the gym. "I need this place spotless. Champions need a clean environment, you know what I'm saying?" One of his friends chimed in. "Man, you're cold-blooded." "Just speaking facts," Tyler said, bouncing on his toes and throwing shadow punches. "Some people are born to be great, and some people are born to clean up after greatness. That's just how the world works. Natural order and all that." A few of the other boxers in the gym glanced over, and their expressions showed clear disapproval. This wasn't the kind of place where disrespect was supposed to fly. Boxing gyms had always been great equalizers, places where everyone from every background came together with a common purpose. The sport had a way of humbling people, of teaching respect through hard lessons. But Tyler hadn't learned those lessons yet. His undefeated record had inflated his ego to dangerous proportions. Coach Rivera finally spoke up, his voice cutting through the laughter. "Tyler, that's enough. Get back to work." "I am working," Coach Tyler protested, though he did return to the heavy bag. "Just having a little fun. No harm done, right?" The coach didn't respond, but his jaw was tight. He had been training fighters for over 30 years and had seen plenty of talented young men destroy themselves with arrogance. Talent was never enough on its own. The sport had a way of finding your weaknesses, and if your biggest weakness was your ego, boxing would eventually expose it in the most brutal way possible. James had moved to the far corner of the gym now, organizing cleaning supplies in a small storage closet. If the incident had bothered him, he didn't show it. He went about his duties with the same quiet efficiency as always. A few of the older regulars at the gym nodded respectfully to him as they passed. They had come to appreciate his work ethic and his humble demeanor over the months he had been there. Tyler continued his workout, but he kept glancing over at James as if looking for another opportunity to get a laugh from his friends. There was something almost desperate in the way he sought validation, as if he needed constant confirmation of his superiority. His punches were powerful, there was no denying that. He had genuine skill and natural athleticism, but there was a sloppiness to his technique, a reliance on physical gifts rather than refined skill. He got away with it because he was young and strong and fast, but Coach Rivera could see the holes in his game. Holes that a truly skilled opponent would exploit mercilessly. As the training session wound down, Tyler and his crew gathered their things, still laughing and joking about the afternoon's events. Tyler grabbed his gym bag and took one last look around the gym, his eyes landing on James one more time. The older man was back to mopping, his movements steady and methodical. "Keep up the good work," Tyler called out with mock encouragement. "This place is looking real clean. Maybe one day you'll work your way up to assistant janitor." His friends erupted in laughter as they headed toward the exit. James looked up briefly, and for just a moment something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, not even sadness. It was something else entirely. Something that might have given Tyler pause if he had been paying attention. It was the look of someone who knew things, who had seen things, who understood the way the world really worked in ways that Tyler, for all his bravado, did not yet comprehend. As the door closed behind Tyler and his entourage, the gym seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. Several boxers shook their heads in disgust. One of the older trainers walked over to James and spoke to him quietly, words that no one else could hear. James nodded and smiled slightly, then returned to his work. Coach Rivera stood by the ring, staring at the door where his fighter had just exited. He was troubled. Tyler had real potential, maybe even championship potential. But potential meant nothing if it was wrapped in arrogance and disrespect. The coach had seen it happen too many times before. A talented young fighter gets a few wins, starts believing their own hype, and then gets knocked into reality by someone hungrier, someone smarter, someone who had learned the lessons that Tyler was refusing to learn. The gym slowly returned to its normal rhythm, the sounds of training filling the space once again, and through it all James continued his work, pushing his mop across the floor, a man with secrets that no one in that gym could have imagined. The next morning arrived cold and gray, with clouds hanging low over the city. Tyler woke up feeling like he was on top of the world. His phone was filled with messages from fans and followers who had seen clips of his latest knockout victory circulating on social media. The validation felt good, like fuel for his ego. He spent an extra few minutes scrolling through the comments, reading the praise, letting it sink in. He arrived at Sullivan's gym earlier than usual. His coach had scheduled an extra session to work on his footwork, something Tyler thought was unnecessary but went along with anyway. The gym was quieter in the early hours, with only a handful of dedicated fighters already there, putting in work before most people had finished their first cup of coffee. As Tyler walked through the door, he immediately spotted James in the corner, wiping down equipment with a clean rag. The older man was meticulous in his work, making sure every piece of equipment was sanitized and ready for the day's training. Tyler felt that familiar urge to assert himself, to remind everyone in the room of the pecking order. "Morning, sunshine," Tyler called out across the gym, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Hope you dreamed about cleaning because you've got a full day of it ahead." James looked up briefly, nodded once in acknowledgement, and returned to his work. The lack of reaction bothered Tyler more than he wanted to admit. Most people either laughed at his jokes or got visibly upset. James did neither. He simply existed in his own space, unbothered and focused on his tasks. Tyler dropped his gym bag near the ring and started his warm-up routine. He went through the motions, stretching and shadowboxing, but his attention kept drifting back to James. There was something about the older man's quiet dignity that irritated him, like an itch he couldn't scratch. It felt like a challenge, even though James hadn't said or done anything remotely challenging. After about 20 minutes, Coach Rivera still hadn't arrived. Tyler's phone buzzed with a text message. The coach was running late, stuck in traffic, and would be there in 30 minutes. Tyler smiled to himself. 30 minutes of unsupervised time in the gym. That could be entertaining. He walked over to where James was now cleaning the heavy bags, making sure the leather was conditioned and the chains were secure. Tyler started shadowboxing right next to him, throwing exaggerated combinations that came dangerously close to the older man. His footwork was deliberately sloppy, splashing in a small puddle of water that James had just mopped up. "Oops, my bad," Tyler said with a grin. "Guess you'll have to clean that again. Good thing you're here, right? What would we do without you?" James set down his cleaning supplies and straightened up slowly. He looked at Tyler with an expression that was hard to read. Not angry, not intimidated. If anything, he looked almost sad, like he was watching someone make a mistake they didn't have to make. "You've been boxing how long?" James asked quietly. His voice was deep and measured, with a hint of an accent that suggested he had grown up somewhere down south. Tyler was caught off guard by the direct question. 6 years, he answered, puffing out his chest slightly. 6 years and I've never lost. Not a single fight. Not even a single round in sparring. Some of us are just natural-born fighters, I guess. James nodded slowly as if considering this information carefully. 6 years. That's a good start. A start? Tyler laughed. Man, I'm already finishing guys who've been boxing their whole lives. I'm not starting anything. I'm already there, maybe, James said softly. He picked up a pair of old boxing gloves that were sitting on a nearby bench. They were worn and faded, clearly used for years. I did a little boxing myself back in the day. Tyler's eyes lit up like someone had just handed him a gift. This was too good to be true. He immediately called over to the 2 other boxers who were training nearby. "Yo, come here. You gotta hear this. The janitor says he used to box." The 2 fighters exchanged uncomfortable glances but walked over. They both knew Tyler well enough to know that nothing good was about to happen, but they also knew better than to get on his bad side. "Tell them," Tyler said to James, barely containing his amusement. "Tell them about your boxing career." James remained calm, unfazed by the mockery. "Long time ago now. Different era. The game has changed a lot since then." "I bet it has," Tyler said, laughing. "Back when you were fighting, what did you do? Throw hands in the parking lot? Street corners?" He turned to his small audience. "Probably got in a few bar fights and thinks he's a boxer." One of the other fighters, a heavyweight named Danny, spoke up quietly. "Hey man, maybe ease up a little." "Ease up? I'm just having a conversation," Tyler protested, though his grin suggested otherwise. He turned back to James. "So, since you're such an experienced fighter, maybe you want to give me some tips? Share some of that old school wisdom?" James looked at Tyler for a long moment. There was something in his eyes now, a spark of something that hadn't been there before. "You really want to learn?" he asked. "Oh, absolutely," Tyler said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "I'm always looking to improve my craft. Please teach me your ancient secrets." "All right then," James said simply. "Get in the ring." The gym went completely silent. Even the rhythmic sound of someone jumping rope in the far corner stopped. Everyone turned to look at what was happening. Tyler's grin faltered for just a second before returning even wider. "You want to get in the ring? With me?" Tyler asked, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You asked for tips," James said, already walking toward the ring steps. "Best way to teach is to show, not tell." Tyler looked around at the small crowd that was forming. This was perfect. This was better than perfect. He was about to embarrass this old man in front of everyone, and it would be a story he could tell for years. The janitor who thought he could step into the ring with an undefeated prospect. "All right, old-timer," Tyler said, climbing through the ropes. "Let's do this. But don't worry, I'll go easy on you. Just light sparring, right? Don't want you getting hurt and filing a workers' comp claim." James removed his gray custodian shirt, folding it neatly and placing it on a chair outside the ring. Underneath, he wore a plain white t-shirt that revealed arms that were still surprisingly muscular for a man his age. His shoulders were broad and there were old scars visible on his forearms, the kind that came from years of blocking punches. Danny, the heavyweight who had tried to get Tyler to back off earlier, offered James a pair of gloves. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. "I'm sure," James replied, pulling on the gloves with practiced ease. His hands moved with muscle memory, wrapping and securing the gloves in a way that only someone who had done it thousands of times would know. Tyler was already gloved up and bouncing around the ring, throwing combinations at the air, showing off for the growing crowd. More people had stopped their training to watch. Word was spreading through the gym that something interesting was about to happen. One of the regulars, an old trainer named Pete who had been around the gym for decades, pulled out his phone. Something about James had caught his attention. The way he moved, the way he carried himself, even the way he adjusted his gloves. It all seemed familiar somehow, like a memory just out of reach. "What are we doing here?" Tyler called out, his impatience showing. 3 rounds? 2 rounds? Or you want to quit after 1? "However long it takes," James said quietly, moving to his corner. Another fighter volunteered to act as referee and timekeeper. He looked nervously between the young, undefeated prospect and the older janitor, clearly worried about how this was going to end. "Keep it light, guys," he said. "This is just sparring. Touch sparring, okay? Whatever you say," Tyler replied, though his grin suggested he had other plans. The makeshift referee looked at both men. "You both ready?" They nodded. "All right then, box." The gym held its breath as Tyler and James moved toward the center of the ring. Tyler came out aggressively, just like he always did. He believed in overwhelming opponents early, using his youth and power to break their will before they could settle into any kind of rhythm. It had worked against everyone he had faced so far. He threw a quick jab, then another, then a right hand with bad intentions behind it. All 3 punches hit nothing but air. James had barely seemed to move, but somehow he wasn't there anymore. Tyler reset and tried again. A jab, a hook, an uppercut. Again, nothing. It was like trying to hit smoke. Tyler's grin started to fade. He planted his feet and really let his hands go, throwing a 6-punch combination with serious speed. Every single punch missed. And worse than that, he felt something tap his chin, soft, barely more than a touch, but it landed clean. Then another tap to his ribs. Then one more to his chin. 3 touches in the span of 2 seconds, each one landing exactly where James wanted it to land. The crowd around the ring began to murmur. Tyler heard it, and it made his face flush with embarrassment and anger. He charged forward, trying to use his size and strength to corner the older man. But James just wasn't there. His footwork was incredible, economical, never wasting a single step. He moved just enough to make Tyler miss, but never more than necessary. In the corner, old Pete suddenly gasped, his phone screen illuminating his shocked face. "No way," he whispered, "no way. That's not possible." Tyler was breathing hard now, frustrated and confused. How was this happening? How was some old janitor making him look foolish? He tried to regroup, to use the technical skills his coach had taught him, but nothing was working. Every time he thought he had James lined up, the older man was gone, and those gentle taps kept landing. Tap, 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 each one a message. Each one saying without words, "I could hurt you if I wanted to." The bell rang, ending the first round. Tyler stumbled back to his corner, sucking in air, his mind racing. Across the ring, James stood calmly in his corner, barely breathing hard at all, looking like he had just finished a light warm-up. Tyler sat on the stool in his corner, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. His mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what had just happened. In 6 years of boxing, through 15 professional fights and countless sparring sessions, he had never felt so completely outclassed. It wasn't just that James was fast or skilled. It was something else entirely. It was like the older man could see 3 moves ahead, like he knew what Tyler was going to do before Tyler himself knew. Across the ring, James stood quietly, his hands resting on the ropes. He wasn't showboating or gloating. He just stood there, calm and patient, like he had all the time in the world. That calmness somehow made everything worse for Tyler. He wanted to see the older man tired, breathing hard, showing some sign that the round had affected him. But there was nothing. Danny leaned close to Tyler's corner. "Man, you okay? You want to stop this?" "Stop?" Tyler shot back, his pride wounded. "I'm just getting warmed up." Old man got lucky with a few taps, that's all. But even as he said it, Tyler knew it wasn't true. Luck had nothing to do with what was happening in that ring. This was pure skill, the kind of skill that came from years of experience, from understanding boxing at a level that Tyler hadn't even known existed. On the other side of the ring, old Pete was frantically typing on his phone, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. His eyes kept darting from the phone to James and back again. The expression on his face was a mixture of disbelief and excitement, like someone who had just discovered buried treasure in their backyard. The crowd around the ring had grown larger. Word had spread through the gym that something special was happening. Even the fighters who had been in the locker room or working on the bags in the far corner had migrated over to watch. There was an electricity in the air, a sense that they were witnessing something important, even if most of them didn't understand what it was yet. The timekeeper called out, 10 seconds to round 2. Tyler stood up, rolling his shoulders, trying to shake off the frustration from the first round. He told himself to be smarter this time, to be more patient, to use his jab and work behind it like Coach Rivera was always telling him. No more wild rushing in. No more trying to land the big knockout punch. Just good, solid, fundamental boxing. The bell rang and both men moved to the center of the ring again. This time Tyler was more cautious, circling to his left, keeping his jab out in front of him. He threw the jab once, twice, 3 times. James slipped each one with minimal movement, his head moving just inches to either side. Tyler tried to follow up with a right hand, but again he hit nothing but air. Then James did something that changed everything. He started talking. Your right hand, James said calmly as Tyler threw another combination. You're dropping it every time you jab, see? He tapped Tyler on the side of the head, demonstrating the opening. Right there. You're leaving yourself exposed. Tyler threw another jab and sure enough he felt his right hand dip slightly. Another tap landed on his temple, soft but precise. Your feet are too square, James continued, moving around Tyler with that same effortless grace. You're giving me angles you don't need to give me. Step here instead. He tapped Tyler's lead foot with his own, showing him the adjustment. See the difference? Tyler was so confused he actually stopped throwing punches for a moment. This man, this janitor he had mocked and disrespected, was giving him a boxing lesson in the middle of their sparring session. And the crazy part was that the advice was good. Tyler could feel it. Every correction James made was something Coach Rivera had tried to teach him. But hearing it while actually experiencing the consequences made it click in a way it never had before. You're hunting for the head too much, James went on, his voice never rising, never showing strain even as he made Tyler miss punch after punch. The body, young man. Work the body. Head don't move without the body. You break down the body, the head falls like fruit from a tree. To demonstrate, James stepped in and lightly tapped Tyler's ribs 3 times in rapid succession. Tap, tap, tap. If those had been real punches thrown with power, Tyler would have been in serious trouble. The precision was terrifying. Around the ring, the gathered crowd was murmuring louder now. Some of the older fighters were nodding their heads, recognizing the wisdom in what James was teaching. They had heard these same lessons from their own coaches over the years, but seeing them demonstrated with such clarity was something else entirely. Then Pete suddenly shouted from the edge of the crowd, his voice cutting through the noise. That's James the Ghost Mitchell. Oh my God, that's the Ghost. The name hung in the air for a moment before the gym exploded in sound. Phones came out immediately, dozens of them, as fighters and trainers frantically searched the name. The younger guys who had never heard of him were asking the older ones. The older ones were staring at James with wide eyes like they were seeing an actual ghost. Tyler, still in the ring and breathing hard, had no idea what was happening. What? He called out between breaths. What are you talking about? James the Ghost Mitchell, Pete repeated, his voice shaking with excitement. He held up his phone, showing an old boxing photo on the screen. He was the undisputed middleweight champion from 1998 to 2004, one of the greatest defensive fighters who ever lived. Retired 48-2. The words hit Tyler like a physical blow. Champion, undisputed, greatest defensive fighters. Each word stripped away another layer of his confidence, another piece of the armor he had built around his ego. Danny pulled up a video on his phone, an old fight clip from 2 decades ago. Even in the grainy footage, you could see it. The same movement, the same impossible ability to make opponents miss, the same calm efficiency. The Ghost. They had called him the Ghost because trying to hit him was like fighting a ghost. You could see him, but you couldn't touch him. He's got more title defenses than you got total fights, someone in the crowd said, not mockingly, but as a statement of fact. Tyler felt his legs go weak, not from physical exhaustion, though he was tired, but from the crushing weight of realization. For the past day and a half, he had been mocking, disrespecting, and trying to humiliate an actual legend, a man who had achieved everything Tyler dreamed of achieving, a man who had forgotten more about boxing than Tyler had ever learned. The second round was still going, though Tyler had stopped throwing punches. He just stood there in the center of the ring, staring at James with new eyes. The older man wasn't just a janitor. He wasn't just some guy who used to box a little. He was the Ghost, a living piece of boxing history. You want to keep going? James asked gently, seeing the change in Tyler's demeanor. Tyler nodded, but his heart wasn't in it anymore. Not because he was scared, though there was definitely some fear there now, but because he was embarrassed. Deeply, truly embarrassed in a way he had never felt before. They continued the round, but everything had changed. James kept teaching, kept pointing out mistakes and showing corrections. Tyler tried to absorb it all, tried to learn, but his mind was still reeling from the revelation. The mistake young fighters make, James said as he effortlessly avoided another combination, is thinking that talent is enough, thinking that winning is enough. But boxing isn't just about winning fights. It's about respect. Respect for the sport. Respect for your opponents and respect for everyone who helps make it possible for you to do what you do. Each word landed harder than any punch. Tyler knew James was talking about more than just boxing technique now. He was talking about character, about humility, about all the things Tyler had been lacking. You got speed, you got power, James continued, but your fundamentals are sloppy. You're getting by on natural ability, but there's levels to this game. You keep fighting the way you're fighting, someone's going to expose those holes. Someone's going to make you pay for every mistake. The bell rang, ending the second round. Tyler walked back to his corner on shaky legs. The crowd was still buzzing, still pulling up old videos and articles about James Mitchell. Stories about his legendary defensive skills, about fights where opponents threw hundreds of punches and landed almost none of them, about a career that had put him in the conversation with the all-time greats. Tyler sat down heavily on the stool. He looked across the ring at James, who was standing in his corner looking like he had barely broken a sweat. The older man caught Tyler's eye and nodded once, a simple acknowledgement. There was no triumph in his expression, no satisfaction at having humbled the cocky young fighter. If anything, he looked sad, like he wished things had gone differently. Pete pushed his way through the crowd to the ring apron. "Mr. Mitchell," he called out, his voice full of reverence.
"Sir, I watched all your fights."
"You were my hero growing up. I can't believe you've been here for months and nobody knew." James smiled slightly. "I'm just James now. That other life was a long time ago." "But what happened?" another trainer asked. "How did you end up—" He trailed off, not wanting to be disrespectful by finishing the sentence. "Life happened," James said simply. "Bad management, bad decisions, trusted the wrong people. Lost most of what I made, but that's all right. Honest work is nothing to be ashamed of. I'd rather clean floors with my dignity intact than live off past glory without it." The words hung in the air, a teaching moment for everyone present. Tyler especially felt the weight of them. Here was a man who had been at the very top of the sport, who had experienced fame and success, and who now worked as a janitor without complaint or bitterness. And Tyler, who had achieved a fraction of what James had achieved, had treated him like he was worthless. The shame was almost unbearable. The gym felt different now. The atmosphere had shifted from curiosity and entertainment to something heavier, more serious. Tyler sat on his stool, staring down at his gloves, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The crowd around the ring had grown even larger, with people pulling up chairs and standing on equipment to get a better view. But they weren't watching for entertainment anymore. They were witnessing something rare, a moment where ego and reality were about to collide in a way that would change someone forever. Coach Rivera finally arrived, pushing through the crowd with a confused expression. "What's going on here?" he asked, looking from the gathered fighters to Tyler in the ring to James standing calmly in the opposite corner. Then his eyes went wide. "Wait, James Mitchell? The James Mitchell?" "The one and only," Pete said, still holding up his phone with old fight footage playing. "Been cleaning our gym for 6 months and none of us knew." The coach's face went through several emotions at once. Shock, disbelief, then something that looked like anger. Not at James, but at the situation, at the missed opportunity, at the fact that a legend had been walking among them unrecognized. He looked at Tyler, and in that moment Tyler knew his coach had figured out exactly what had led to this situation. "Tyler," Coach Rivera said quietly, "tell me you didn't." Tyler couldn't find words. His silence was answer enough. The coach closed his eyes and shook his head slowly. When he opened them again, he climbed up to the ring apron. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm so sorry. If I had known you were here, if I had any idea, things would have been very different." "No need to apologize," James said kindly. "You didn't know. Most people don't recognize me anymore. It's been 20 years and I've aged. Plus, people see what they expect to see. They see a man in a custodian uniform, they see a janitor. Nothing wrong with that. There's everything wrong with it when one of my fighters treats you with disrespect, Coach Rivera said firmly. He turned to Tyler. Get over here. Tyler stood on shaky legs and walked to his coach's corner. The walk felt like it took forever, with every pair of eyes in the gym watching him. He had never felt so small, so foolish, so completely exposed. You want to tell me what happened? The coach asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Tyler opened his mouth but couldn't get the words out. How could he explain it? How could he justify the way he had acted? There was no explanation that would make it okay. No excuse that would erase what he had done. James spoke up from across the ring. The young man challenged me to give him some pointers. So we're sparring. That's all. It was a kindness Tyler didn't deserve. James was giving him an out, a way to save face in front of everyone. But Tyler couldn't take it. Something inside him, some small piece of decency that still existed beneath all the arrogance, wouldn't let him hide behind a lie. No, Tyler said, his voice barely above a whisper. That's not what happened. He took a deep breath and spoke louder. I was disrespectful. Yesterday and today. I mocked him, made fun of him, treated him like he was beneath me. I didn't know who he was, but that doesn't matter. Even if he was just a janitor with no boxing history, I was wrong. I was completely wrong. The gym was silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Tyler forced himself to look across the ring at James. I'm sorry, sir. I'm truly sorry. Not because you're a champion. Not because you're famous, but because you're a person who deserves respect, and I didn't give you that. I judged you based on your job, and I was cruel about it. There's no excuse for that. James nodded slowly, taking in the apology. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then he spoke, and his words carried the weight of experience and wisdom. You know what the hardest thing about boxing is? It's not the training. It's not the pain. It's not even stepping into that ring knowing you might get hurt. The hardest thing is learning who you really are, because boxing has a way of showing you the truth about yourself, whether you want to see it or not. He moved to the center of the ring, gesturing for Tyler to join him. Tyler walked over, unsure of what was coming next. You want to know why they called me the Ghost? James asked. It wasn't just because I was hard to hit. It was because I had learned to let go of my ego. Ego makes you heavy, makes you slow, makes you predictable. When you fight with ego, you're fighting to prove something to other people. When you fight without it, you're free. You can move like smoke, like a ghost. He put a glove on Tyler's shoulder, a gesture that was both fatherly and instructive. You got talent, son. Real talent. Your coach knows it, everyone here can see it. But talent without character is just wasted potential. You can have all the skill in the world, but if you don't have respect, if you don't have humility, this sport will chew you up and spit you out. Tyler felt tears burning in his eyes but refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of everyone. But James seemed to sense it anyway. It's okay to be humbled, James said quietly so only Tyler could hear. Best thing that ever happened to me was getting humbled. I was a lot like you once. Thought I was invincible. Thought I was better than everyone else. Then I met a fighter who showed me different. He didn't just beat me, he taught me. Taught me that being strong means lifting others up, not putting them down. Coach Rivera climbed into the ring, standing beside his fighter. Mr. Mitchell, I know this is probably too much to ask, but would you consider working here? As a trainer, I mean. Not as a janitor. We'd pay you properly, give you the respect you deserve. James smiled, a real smile that lit up his face. I appreciate that, Coach, I really do. But I don't know if I'm ready to be back in that world full-time. It's been a long time. Then part-time, the coach pressed. A few days a week. Share your knowledge with these young fighters. They need someone like you. Someone who understands what this sport really means. Before James could answer, Tyler spoke up. I need someone like you. His voice was stronger now, more certain. Coach Rivera is great, but I've got holes in my game. Big holes. If you'll teach me, if you'll work with me, I promise I'll listen. I promise I'll do the work. And I promise I'll be better. Not just as a fighter, but as a person. James studied Tyler's face, looking for sincerity, looking for truth. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him because he nodded once. All right. But I've got conditions. Anything, Tyler said quickly. First, you drop the entourage. Those boys who follow you around laughing at everything you say. They're not helping you grow. Second, you start treating everyone in this gym with respect. And I mean everyone. The other fighters, the trainers, the people who clean up, the folks at the front desk. Everyone. Third, you do the work. Real work. No shortcuts, no complaining. You show up early, you stay late, and you give me everything you've got. Tyler nodded eagerly. Done, all of it. I swear. And fourth, James said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. You remember this feeling right here. This embarrassment, this shame you're feeling right now. You hold on to it, not to torture yourself, but to remind yourself what happens when you forget where you came from. Pride comes before the fall, young man. Always has, always will. I will, Tyler promised. I'll never forget this. The crowd around the ring began to clap. It started with one person, then spread until the entire gym was applauding. They weren't just celebrating the fact that a legend was back in their midst. They were celebrating growth, change, the possibility that someone could recognize their mistakes and choose to be better. Coach Rivera extended his hand to James. So we have a deal? You'll train here? James shook his hand firmly. We have a deal, but I've got one more condition. I still want to do the custodial work too. I'm not ashamed of it. It's honest work and it keeps me humble. Plus, I like keeping the place clean. Is that all right? The coach laughed, a sound of pure joy and relief. Mr. Mitchell, you can do whatever you want. You've earned that right 100 times over. Danny, who had been watching from outside the ring, called out, Does this mean we all get to learn from the ghost? Because I've got about 1,000 questions. James laughed too. Slow down, big man. One student at a time. Let me work with Tyler here first, make sure I've still got what it takes to teach. If that goes well, maybe we'll expand. The crowd began to disperse, though everyone was talking excitedly about what they had just witnessed. Old fighters were sharing stories about James's legendary fights. Young fighters were pulling up videos on their phones, watching footage of the ghost in his prime, seeing the same moves they had just witnessed performed 20 years ago in championship bouts. Tyler and James stood in the center of the ring, surrounded by the buzz of activity but somehow existing in their own space. When do we start? Tyler asked. We already started, James replied. The first lesson was today. The lesson about respect, about humility, about understanding that there's always someone better, someone who can teach you something if you're willing to learn. And the second lesson? James smiled. The second lesson is tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. sharp. We're going to rebuild your fundamentals from the ground up. It's going to be hard work, probably the hardest work you've ever done. You ready for that? Tyler didn't hesitate. Yes, sir. I'll be here. As they climbed out of the ring, Pete approached with his phone again. Mr. Mitchell, would you mind if I took a picture? Just for the gym's wall of fame? We've got photos of all the champions who've trained here and you belong up there. James looked at the wall Pete was pointing to, covered with photos of fighters in their glory days. He had spent months in this gym without even glancing at that wall, without thinking about his own past. All right, he said finally. But I want Tyler in the picture too. Starting today, we're a team. They posed together, the legend and the student, the retired champion and the undefeated prospect who had just learned the most important lesson of his career. As the camera flashed, neither of them smiled. They looked serious, focused, like two fighters about to embark on a journey together, because that's exactly what they were. 6 months had passed since that morning in the gym when Tyler's world had been turned upside down. 6 months of showing up at 6 a.m. sharp, of brutal training sessions that left him exhausted in ways he had never experienced before. 6 months of learning what real dedication looked like, what true discipline meant, and most importantly, what it took to become not just a better fighter, but a better person. The changes had been immediate and dramatic. The very next day after the sparring session, Tyler had gathered his entourage and told them he was moving forward alone. It hadn't been easy. These were guys he had considered friends, guys who had been with him through his rise. But James had been right. They weren't helping him grow. They were just along for the ride, feeding his ego and taking whatever scraps of fame came their way. The first few weeks of training under James were the hardest thing Tyler had ever done. They didn't work on power or speed. They worked on the basics. Footwork for hours and hours until Tyler's legs burned and he thought he couldn't take another step. Then they'd do it for another hour. Defensive movement, slipping punches by fractions of an inch, learning to waste no energy, to move only as much as necessary and not a bit more. You've been trying to knock everyone out. James had told him during one of those early sessions. That's not boxing. That's just violence with gloves on. Real boxing is art, it's science. It's chess at 100 miles an hour. You want to be a champion? Then you need to learn to think in that ring, not just throw punches. Tyler had absorbed it all like a sponge. Every lesson, every correction, every piece of wisdom that James offered. And slowly, gradually, he began to transform. His movement became smoother, more efficient. His punches became sharper, more accurate. But more than that, his whole approach to the sport changed. He stopped trying to prove he was the best and started working to actually become the best. The changes outside the ring were just as significant. Tyler started arriving at the gym early, not just for his own training, but to help set up equipment. He'd stay late to help clean up, working alongside James, the two of them talking about boxing, about life, about everything. He learned that James had lost nearly everything he'd earned during his career, due to a dishonest manager who had stolen from him. He learned about James's daughter, who he was putting through college with the money he made from his custodial work, and now his training fees. Tyler began treating everyone at the gym with genuine respect. The other fighters, the staff, everyone, he'd help younger fighters with their technique, offering guidance instead of mockery. He'd encourage the guys who were struggling, remembering how close he had come to destroying his own career with arrogance. Word spread quickly through the boxing community. Tyler Brooks was different now, humble, focused, dangerous in a whole new way. His fighting style evolved dramatically under James's guidance. Where he used to rely on power and aggression, he now fought with precision and intelligence. He learned to set traps, to make opponents think they had openings that didn't really exist. He learned the art of defense that James had mastered, the ability to make fighters miss by the smallest margins and make them pay for every mistake. Coach Rivera watched the transformation with quiet satisfaction. He had always seen Tyler's potential, but now that potential was finally being realized. The raw talent was still there, but now it was refined, shaped, turned into something truly special. I've been coaching for 30 years, he told James one afternoon, and I've never seen someone change so completely, so fast. Whatever you're doing, it's working. I'm not doing anything special, James replied. I'm just showing him what's possible when you stop fighting yourself and start fighting smart. Tyler's next fight was scheduled. A real test against a veteran fighter who had never been knocked out. A crafty boxer with over 30 professional fights under his belt. The kind of fighter who, 6 months ago, might have given Tyler serious problems. In the locker room before the fight, James wrapped Tyler's hands with practiced efficiency. The ritual, something they had done dozens of times now in training. Remember what we worked on, James said calmly. He's going to try to make it ugly, try to drag you into a brawl. Don't let him box move, make him miss and make him pay. You're the better fighter now. Trust your training. I'm nervous, Tyler admitted. It was something he never would have said 6 months ago. Back then, admitting weakness would have felt impossible. Good, James said. Nerves mean you care. Nerves mean you respect your opponent and respect the sport. The day you stop being nervous is the day you need to retire. Tyler entered the ring to a different kind of reception than he was used to. The crowd cheered, but it felt more genuine now. Less like people watching a spectacle and more like fans supporting a real fighter. He touched gloves with his opponent, looked him in the eye, and nodded with respect. The fight was a masterclass. Tyler boxed beautifully, using everything James had taught him. He moved like water, flowing around his opponent's attacks, never in one place long enough to be hit clean. His punches were precise, each one landing exactly where he intended. He worked the body systematically, just like James had taught him, breaking down his opponent's foundation before going upstairs. In the 7th round, his opponent was exhausted, arms heavy, guard dropping. Tyler could have gone for the knockout, could have unloaded with the kind of powerful combinations that had defined his early career. Instead, he stayed patient, stayed technical, and let the referee stop the fight when his opponent could no longer defend himself properly. A technical knockout, but more importantly, a display of complete dominance through skill rather than just power. In the locker room after the fight, Tyler sat with ice on his hands while James checked him over for any injuries. You did good tonight, James said simply. Real good. That's the fighter I knew you could be. I couldn't have done it without you, Tyler said. Any of it. The training, the changes, everything. You saved my career. You might have saved my life. James shook his head. No, son. You did that yourself. I just showed you the door. You're the one who walked through it. You're the one who put in the work, who changed your attitude, who decided to be better. That was all you. A few weeks later, Tyler got the call he had been dreaming of. A title shot. One of the major sanctioning bodies was offering him a chance to fight for a championship belt. 6 months ago, he would have jumped at it immediately, convinced he was ready. Now he sat down with James and Coach Rivera to discuss it seriously. "Am I ready?" Tyler asked them honestly. James and the coach exchanged looks. "Physically? Maybe," James said. "You've improved tremendously. But that's not the only question. Are you ready mentally? Are you ready for what comes with being a champion? Because that belt doesn't just mean you're the best fighter. It means you represent something bigger than yourself." Tyler thought about it for a long time. "I think I am," he said finally. "But not because I'm undefeated. Not because I think I'm better than everyone. But because I know now what it means to be a champion. It means having respect, having humility, understanding that every person you meet has something to teach you if you're willing to learn." James smiled, that warm smile that Tyler had come to know well over the past months. "Then you're ready. Let's get to work." The training camp for the title fight was intense. James pushed Tyler harder than ever before, but Tyler never complained. Every early morning, every brutal sparring session, every moment of exhaustion was just another step on the journey. The gym had become his second home, and the people there had become his family. The night before the fight, James sat with Tyler in his hotel room. "Win or lose tomorrow," James said, "I want you to know I'm proud of you. Not because of your record or your skills, but because of who you've become. You took a hard lesson and you learned from it. That takes real strength." "I'm going to win," Tyler said with quiet confidence. Not arrogance, but the kind of belief that comes from preparation and hard work. "And when I do, I want you in the ring with me. I want everyone to see that the ghost is back, that you never really left. You deserve that recognition." "I don't need recognition," James said, "but I'll be there. We're a team." The fight itself was everything Tyler had trained for. His opponent was tough, experienced, dangerous. But Tyler was different now. He didn't just rely on youth and power. He fought smart, fought patient, used every lesson James had taught him. He made adjustments between rounds, listened to his corner, adapted his strategy based on what he was seeing and feeling in the ring. In the 12th and final round, both fighters were exhausted, but Tyler was ahead on the scorecards. He could have coasted, could have run and held on to win a decision. Instead, he pressed forward, showing the heart of a true champion. Not reckless, but brave. Controlled, but aggressive. The combination of everything he had learned. When the final bell rang, Tyler knew he had won. The judges confirmed it. Unanimous decision. Tyler Brooks, the new champion. In the center of the ring, with the belt being fastened around his waist, Tyler called James in from the corner. The older man climbed through the ropes and Tyler embraced him. The cameras flashed, capturing the moment. The announcer handed Tyler the microphone for his victory speech. 6 months ago, Tyler began, his voice carrying through the arena. "I was undefeated, but I was losing. I had talent, but no character. I had wins, but no wisdom. Then I met a man who changed everything, a man I disrespected, a man I judged unfairly, a man who had every reason to write me off but chose to teach me instead." He put his arm around James's shoulder. "This man is James the Ghost Mitchell. He's a legend, a former champion, and the best teacher I could have asked for. But more than that, he taught me that being a champion isn't about how many fights you win. It's about how you treat people. It's about respect, humility, and understanding that we all have value no matter what job we do or where we come from." The crowd erupted in applause. James stood there, humble as always, but there was moisture in his eyes. He had been forgotten by the sport he loved, reduced to cleaning floors. But now, standing in that ring with his student, he was remembered. Not just as a fighter, but as a teacher, a mentor, a man who had helped shape a champion. Tyler held up the belt with one hand and kept his other arm around James. "This belt belongs to both of us," he said, "because a true champion is nothing without the people who help them get there." Later that night, after all the interviews and celebrations, Tyler and James sat alone in the locker room. The belt sat on the bench between them. "You know what the best part of tonight was?" Tyler asked. "What's that?" "Not the belt, not the win, but knowing that I earned it the right way, that I can look at myself in the mirror and be proud of not just what I accomplished, but who I am." James nodded. That's the real victory right there. Championships come and go. Belts get passed from one fighter to the next. But character? That stays with you forever. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, teacher and student. Two men from different generations brought together by a sport that had taught them both the same lessons, just in different ways. Thank you, Tyler said finally, for everything. For teaching me, for believing in me when I didn't deserve it, for showing me what really matters. You're welcome, James replied. But thank you too. You gave an old fighter a reason to be back in the sport he loves. You reminded me that I still have something to offer. We helped each other, and that's what it's all about. As they left the arena together that night, champion and mentor, neither of them could have imagined where they'd be 6 months ago, but both of them knew exactly where they were heading next. Back to the gym. Back to work. Back to the journey of becoming better. Not just as fighters, but as human beings, because that's what real champions do.